Today. My name is Tori Manley, and I live on Guam. And my original question for our project was, what are Guam's actionable items to adapt and mitigate climate change? And if there's been any recent updates related to climate change on Guam. I have evolved my question to what are the social, economic, and environmental impacts of climate refugees from other islands? And what are some adjustments Guam will have to make to accommodate a number of migrants? How many more migrants are we able to take on an infrastructure level? And can we comfortably accommodate for the different social and cultural factors that come along with other people from other islands? A difficult question that I've asked which would be, what big, powerful nation would benefit from our survival? I saw that in a different research question, and it was very disheartening to hear. So the motivation of this study was to further understand social vulnerabilities, Guam's vulnerabilities, and to find ways that several island nations can share our 210 square mile land peacefully. So my hypothesis for this study was directly correlated to what I know on a personal level living on Guam. I think that there will be a lot of social and cultural tensions, especially since Guam, in many factors, doesn't have enough resources for the military, for the indigenous people who are the Chamorros, and the culture and the Americanization that comes with being a U.S. unincorporated territory. There's always been tension between these several factors, and this includes other factors as well. Some observations that are being addressed in my project are the physical characteristics of climate change and how it affects other islands and Guam. During the beginning of our semester, I was trying to find topics that correlate to Guam that have several significant issues. In the past, I've researched about waste issues on Guam and the Pacific. And the topic I was able to undertake was research into climate change and Guam's vulnerabilities concerning our economy, our society, and our environment. Some of my challenges was working hard to find all of these issues that were covered on Guam's survival in climate change, adaptation, and mitigation going forward into the future concerning climate change. And then our professor said that it would be better to look at other Micronesian islands and how they will survive climate change, especially since a lot of the other islands in Micronesia are low-lying atoll islands. So I began to look at other Micronesian islands and how they have been surviving climate change, the adverse effects of climate change, and if it's possible if Guam will become a climate refugee migration location as atolls begin to disappear partially or completely into the ocean. This was initially a challenge because I felt hurt when I was suggested to redirect my focus from actionable items for Guam into other Micronesian islands and being a survival hub for other islands. But I was happy to redirect my focus into researching other island nations in Micronesia and how Guam can help other islands to adapt to climate change on their islands or to help them adapt on Guam. Guam and its people have a higher chance of survival within 100 years compared to other island nations in Micronesia. And in the photo on the right is of Guam, 210 square miles. The closest to us in the biggest landmass is the southern portion of Guam. Below the southern portion of Guam is Dino or Cocos Island. And out into the distance, right here is Luta, the next island in the Mariana Islands. This project is important to me because I knew of different islands in Micronesia had a variety of different issues that were out of the people's control. For example, in this photo, this is in one of the islands in the Federated States of Micronesia, and many islands are low-lying atolls, and the sea level rise is something that they have no control over. Many people in other islands rely on crops rather than imported goods. So there's a lot of issues with saltwater intrusion on their crops in other islands and possibly on Guam in the future. Another reason I took on this new suggestion of study is because I want to make these topics known to more people. This is essentially a cry for help for people who are knowledgeable about what's happening and how it affects someone such as myself on a personal level. I'm hoping for the compassion and humanity that I have found in myself for my oceanic brothers and sisters to be mirrored into anyone who hears these stories. So this is Micronesia. There are over 2,000 small islands, and there's Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia. There's a lot of different island nations within those states. Palau and the Northern Mariana Islands and Guam, that's all part of the Marianas, but we are politically differentiated from the rest of the islands in Northern Marianas. Just as a fun fact. I'm hoping for the compassion and humanity that I found and how I've tackled this project. So I began my research. I began to write down as much as I knew about climate change and how it affects me personally and how it affects my people, the culture, the society, and our environment. And then I've researched vulnerability assessments, and I found that different governmental agencies and different organizations focus on different aspects of climate change, and they all have different vulnerability assessments. For example, the Federal Emergency Management Agency talked about storms and how we can better prepare for storms. And then the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, created a coral reef resilience and social vulnerability to climate change on Guam. That's a report, and it's one of the most comprehensive, in-depth, and up-to-date vulnerability assessments that we have for Guam. So in this photo, it says we are not drowning, we are fighting. This is one of the other Micronesian islands. I believe it's Kiribati. Everyone in the different islands of Micronesia have different cultures, and this is one way that's represented. We're not drowning, they're fighting. So there were some methods and processes that I'm happy to have known and I'm happy to have learned on this process of the project. For this assignment, it would have been more challenging if I didn't have extra technology assistance for my expressed dyslexic traits, such as I utilize talk to text a lot. So when I talk, it can type things out for me. I've used audio read out loud. So instead of focusing on trying to comprehend the symbols of words, I was focused on hearing it so I can better comprehend it and watching the words so it can better correlate to my brain and I can understand it better. I used a dyslexic font, which is specifically for individuals who have a difficult time differentiating letters, or they have word displacement when they're reading texts. And that's some of the challenges and things, the adaptive technology that I used to help me throughout this project. And I'm happy to have learned GIS systems in a previous class, and it helped me create additional layers of information on a map that can better impact the story. And I'm happy to have learned the mind map. So anytime I would go off topic, I could refer back to my mind map and see where I should stop within research and to come back to my paper. The major elements I learned from my project was that Guam has no definite action plan for climate change. We don't have a climate task force team. And I've learned that places that had the least social vulnerability on the vulnerability index happen to be places with the biggest European American populations, which is also correlated with the military bases that we have on Guam here and here. And I also learned that there's a lot of different ties between the military installations on Guam that could jeopardize our ability to better survive in the future. I've also learned that saltwater intrusion onto our crops, our aquifer, and our watersheds is a worry. But because of the toxins of military installations and how they dispose of toxic waste, we may not be healthy enough to even implement any of these changes in the future. And here are two places of refuge that are the most common for Micronesian islands. It is Guam and Hawaii. There's a lot of other Micronesian island refugees that go to these places. For example, in the Bikini Atolls of the Marshall Islands, there have been military testing. It has been bombed by many different bombs that are equivalent to the Hiroshima bombs, and those people cannot go back to their islands, so they have been permanently displaced, which is incredibly unfortunate to know about and to hear. There's a lot of different gaps in knowledge concerning my project. I do not know the time frame when direct adaptations to climate change will happen. I am unaware if there's anything that Guam can do as a territory of the United States to help other island nations adapt better to climate change on their island. I'm unaware of any recommendations that have been published, if they've been implemented, and if they will be implemented in a timely manner, preferably within 50 years of today. And I'm happy to learn that there are different agencies that are working to address climate change. For example, the Guam Waste Authority, their focus is on a more sustainable Guam. They have something called Guam Zero Waste Initiative, and much of our waste that goes into the landfill is compostable. So it's food waste, green waste, and other things that can better biodegrade. So they're finding different ways to implement that into farmers and land restoration rather than putting it into the landfill that can create more methane instead of naturally composting. And if it was to be naturally composted, it would turn into carbon instead. So concerning culture, this is Master Larry. He is from Yap, and he teaches different island nations, including Guam and Hawaii, of traditional navigation systems, and we integrate it into the knowledge of what we know with our cultures, and we try to incorporate what he teaches us as island wisdom. So we can take science and indigenous island wisdom from Micronesia, and we can use it to adapt to climate change and adapt to different social, economic, and environmental vulnerabilities that we can strengthen. This project has not completely changed how I thought, but it has brought a greater amount of urgency within myself. And this urgency leads me to tell the story, and it makes me think of solutions. And I wanted to ask myself, what could I ask of my classmates? And some things that I would ask that would greatly help the situation is just hearing these sort of stories. The more people who are aware of different cultures that are underrepresented and that are going through a lot of environmental and social changes, knowing our story is a wonderful help. Continuing onto your environmental career paths is another help, and having compassion towards all people. And because of my project, specifically Pacific Islanders who may have lost their land at some point, and other indigenous people that may have lost their lands due to climate change, please have compassion. And if you would like to go further to advocate On Guam and other Micronesian islands, because of our limited political status, we do not have a direct say in Congress. So advocate to your senator for political support towards Pacific Island nations. Thank you so much for your attention, and we are almost done with our semester. Have a wonderful day.